Welcome to the Culture of Writing podcast, where writers, editors, and content strategists from Salesforce talk about how we work together to improve our craft and make content
the most
better.
Senior executive we've had on the podcast.
Right.
So, John, is it Varese or Varese?
Depends what country you're in.
Okay.
So
Anyway,
if you're in Italy, it's Varese, but if you're here in the US, it's just Varese or Varese.
Varese. Okay. Well, anyway, we're here to talk about human-centric writing, which is a big topic. So, I'll let you explain it to us.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm really really thrilled to be on the podcast. I've watched all of them. They're great. And as you know, you and I have been talking about a lot of these ideas around writing and how to make our writing more human-centric for a long time. So I'm really honored that, you think it's important enough to do a whole podcast on it. So thanks for that. I would love to start by just telling a little story, though. It's a story I've told at a couple places around. I've told it to my teams and all hands, but it's a really great, and I've just got a couple slides to kind of walk you through the story. So this is a story I've told a couple times now around the company. I love this story. It's by now, it's kind of a well-known story at this point. It's kind of cited as one of these great customer service examples and all, the Harvard Business Review and all these different books and things. But I had read about it only recently, and so I wanted to bring it to the team and use it to illustrate some points. So this is the story. This is about the Ritz-Carlton, which is, one of the most famous luxury brands in the world. And so, setting aside what people might think about luxury brands, this is just a great story about people and customer service. So there was a family. They're staying at one of the Ritz-Carltons. I believe it was in Florida. And it was a husband and wife and their child, who was a little bit beyond a toddler. The kid has a favorite stuffed animal. It's a stuffed giraffe. Its name is Joshi. And the family is, there for a number of days. The giraffe is with them the entire time. And they check out. They leave. They're on the plane on the way home, and the family realizes that Joshi is missing. Why do they realize Joshi's missing? Because the kid starts to go crazy. Where's Joshi? Kid is throwing a tantrum. They get home. They cannot calm this kid down. Where's Joshi? So the father calls the Ritz and, gets to a, concierge or whatever. They sort of get in touch with housekeeping. They go to the room they know the family was staying in and look for the giraffe. And they actually find Joshi stuck under one of the beds. Okay. So housekeeping comes back, tells the father, we've found the giraffe, we'd be happy to send it back to our father's like, oh my gosh, thank gosh, oh my gosh. Okay. So he says, would you do me a favor and just take a picture of the giraffe so I can show my kid that the giraffe is safe? They're saying, yes, of course, sir. We'd be happy to do that. So, and here's the twist. Here's where customer service and thinking about the customer and thinking what people are actually feeling out there in the world makes all the difference. What does the staff at the Ritz-Carlton do? Do they take a picture of Joshi? No, they don't just take a picture of Joshi. They take Joshi out to the pool. Joshi's sunbathing. Joshi's having a great time. Joshi even went to the spa, cucumber facial. I mean, Joshi went to the Lost and Found in the Lost and Found department, made some other friends there of other stuffed animals that had been lost. I mean, this is priceless stuff, right? So the Ritz sends the pictures to the father, and the kid is elated, and they send Joshi back, and so the rest is history. So I wanted to tell that story because one, I love the story,
Yeah.
but two, um, it has a number of applications in terms of how we operate at Salesforce. I mean, we're the customer centric company, right? We care only about the customer, and you know, my point is that the Ritz-Carlton didn't have to do all that, right? The Ritz-Carlton went above and beyond the call of, and no one can train you to do that. No one can train you to do what they did. Now, my argument here around customer service, thinking about the customer, thinking about other people, um, is that, and this was the turning point when I told the story in an all hands of mine. There is no reason we can't provide that same level of service in our documentation. There is no reason we can't do that. It's not easy, and no one can kind of train you to do that necessarily. But when you do that, wow, magic. It's just magic, right?
Okay, I have a question. What does, and if I'm getting ahead, that's fine. What does that look like in documentation? Like what would that, what is that? Like we're always going on and on.
Yeah,
The editor.
I pulled up an example for you. Actually got an example for you. You want to see it?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well, let's wait. I'll bring it up, but let me just finish talking about this customer service example too, because this is also, I mean, imagine being this family. Now think about brand loyalty and think about this level of customer service being actually not just a great thing and a nice thing to do, but an actual business differentiator between what this staff at this particular Ritz did for this family versus what this family experienced. Do you think that family is ever going to stay at another hotel when they go for it? They're probably going to go to that hotel forever, right? And
Totally.
That's the point I want to make here too, because I don't want people to think that I'm just talking about like, let's be wonderful human beings, even though that is what I'm talking about. But there is actually a business angle to this too, which is business differentiating. And to my knowledge, obviously I haven't read every doc set out there in the industry, but I haven't seen, that's why Trailhead was so explosive, right? What it did, the way it embraced people, the way it sort of, played on people's desire for gamification, for friendliness, for fun, all that stuff, right? So going back to your question, I mean, so I've been thinking about this and talking about this with various writers for years, and we've done all kinds of experimentation, some good, some bad, but to me, what that means is like going that extra mile for the customer. Okay, let's take a step back. Let's talk about, what do we talk about when we are, the sort of checklist or things that we want to have in the documentation. It has to be technically accurate first and foremost, right? We want it to be as brief as possible because we know people don't have a lot of time to read. We want minimalism to an extent. We want it to provide business value, right? We want people to understand what the value, what the actual business value that they're getting out of Salesforce is. And we want jobs to be done framework is a huge thing, right? We want people to actually understand the job that they are needing to do. The one thing that's missing there for me is that extra mile. It's that extra mile. Like, what is the equivalent of Joshi and the spa, right? To me, it's bringing the writing back to the human who is at the center of our audience. So, and this is another thing I tell the writing team all the time. I was a tech writer. Everybody knows I came up the ranks as a tech writer. I started at Salesforce as a writer on the platform. And when I was a writer, we talk about customers. We understand customers. We go to Dreamforce. We talk to customers. But no, for the most part, tech writers are not actually trained to deeply and intimately understand customer pain points. And a lot of times that comes from the PMs, or maybe if you're a writer who spends a lot of time in support groups, I mean the online support groups, you have a more intimate understanding of that, right? But for the most part, you know, we write, we try to document features. We're working at a breakneck pace. We don't always have time to like really deeply understand stuff. And I think as a result, and especially in recent years, I think as a result, we've kind of gotten away from that more human element, that idea, that very simple idea that there is actually a person. When you put the period on the end of the sentence, there's a person that's going to stop at that period. We send this stuff out into the world, and people read it, and they not only do they read it, but I mean, I know myself firsthand from actually talking to customers and actually, watching people use our documentation. People actually depend on this for their livelihood. And part of what I like to talk about around compassion, or more human-centric or empathetic, or whatever you want to call it, documentation, is the sort of constellation of feelings around what we're doing in documentation, because we're not just documenting features and putting it out to the world. We are trying to make people's lives easier and better, because they want to get their job done quicker so that they can get home to their families and give them Joshi or whatever it is that people are doing when they go home to their families, right? We want to brand Salesforce as a company that does that. We also, as writers, no one gets into writing, no one gets into writing because they want to document features. No one gets into technical writing because they want to document features. People get into writing because they are somehow have identified through some point in their life path that they are communicators, and that communicating with other people is a thing for them. And so there's the other, we talk about the customer, but there's also the writer. When you actually are engaging with a person, the idea of a person who's your audience, who's at the other end of the sentence, makes you a better person, makes you a better writer, makes you a better writer, makes you feel, makes you think, makes you feel, right? And that's what it all, it comes in. This is where I start to get a little touchy-feely around this, because ultimately, you're laughing, but ultimately, I do think, think of the Ritz-Carlton example. I do think that this is ultimately about making people feel something special that Salesforce is doing. To have a tech doc that a reader absorbs, and to go away from that tech doc feeling that somebody actually cared about them, is a very different thing than someone just reading a tech doc and it's a checklist of things. Now, I'll also say, not every doc needs this level of attention. I mean, sometimes a setup checklist is a setup checklist, and you document that and goodbye. But as we know, and we have the data on this, PM after PM after PM, where's the why? Tell me why this matters. The customers are asking why this matters. The GM of Education Cloud, just a couple weeks ago, had this very conversation with me. He's like, we tell them what, we tell them how. I need your writers to give me more why. And the why is the human part. The why is bringing the person back into the equation so that this does not feel like a checklist.
Yeah, I will say that's why I wanted to talk to you, because the lack of the why is one of the big issues that editors will flag. And the reason it's valuable to talk to you and kind of flesh this out a little bit is that if a writer doesn't, perhaps, like you say, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of incoming when you're writing and whatnot, and if a writer gets a list of bullets from a PM, or maybe doesn't have time to understand a product and documents the UI, but when a writer, including myself, doesn't start with understanding the why, as you put it, and structure everything around that, you can then have a huge sunk cost of things that have to be redone because they're not oriented around that. So I get all of that. Would love to hear more, and I don't want to lead you. I want you to take this in order, but I want to hear more about what this actually looks like, right? In technical documentation.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it can take all kinds of forms. I think I think being more compassionate with people can take all kinds of forms. It can take the form of, I mean, let's just start with minimalism. Like that, like providing something extremely valuable that gets you from point A to point B with as few words as possible. It's cheaper for us because it's cheaper to translate. But that in and of itself is an extremely compassionate act, because you're saying, these poor people, they've got to, wade through whoever knows how much documentation. We want to be kind of getting people in and out the door as much as possible. That's a certain kind of documentation. Yes. There are then other kinds of documentations. I was just on a call with one of the content strategists, literally before we were talking. And she was saying that a lot of the feedback coming in from some of the partners, this is not even, Salesforce admins, these are the partners like at Accenture and Price Waterhouse, were saying to us, we need more context, we need more why. The instructions are fine, we need more context, we need more why. So there's a certain kind of documentation. You got to be kind of flexible and agile around this. And, see, like what I'm talking about, this is why, and this is something that you and I have talked about, right? It's like, that's why sometimes guidelines are a little bit hard around this, because you need guidelines, but you also need flexibility, and we don't want to, I don't want to say like, oh, put a human being at the center of every single thing we write, and all of a sudden you've got, writers like trying to force some kind of narrative. And like, that's not what I'm saying either. But I do think that whenever the jobs to be done framework comes up, that's like a particularly fertile area to do this kind of thing, because you're already saying jobs, someone got to be doing the job.
It's the real world goal that they're trying to achieve.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Yes, that's the very succinct way of saying it. Yes. So when you're in the jobs to be done framework, you're already in a human-centered universe, because you're needing to talk about what that human needs to do. And see, my push for the writers is always, and some tech writers find this a bit too touchy-feely, but my push is, what's the feeling you want to generate there, for this person, and what is it that they're trying to do? So let me pull up the example for you, since they might illustrate. So I have an example here that Sam Knox and Suresh Srinivasan, or two people on my team who they've done a few of these, because we've been sort of experimenting with this. We haven't really published anything, but we've just been experimenting for the sake of experimentation, to talk to you, to talk to your team, and so forth. And they pulled up an example from Energy Cloud. All right, so this is an example from Energy Cloud. Here's the original short desk. Utility Self-Serve Portal is a customer service portal that gives your customers a 360-degree view of their accounts and guides them through common tasks. Streamline service operations by empowering your customers to manage their utility accounts in the utility self-service portal. Stan, it's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with this short desk. There's some business value there. Tells me what it's going to do. Probably is yielding me some good SEO results, which actually it is. We know that it is. But Stan, I kind of don't care. I just like this, okay, great. Now, so Sam and Suresh workshopped this, and they came up with this short desk. Calling customer service to pay your utility bill is time consuming. Instead, let your customers manage their utility accounts through the utility self-serve portal to save them time and to reduce call volume to your customer support center. Look how many people are in that second one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Look what this does. And then Amit Singh, our Amit, he was looking at us doing this, and he's like, it's almost like there's a kind of a formula here that makes the thing more powerful. And he's the one who pointed this out, where it's like, you start with the pain point. You start with the pain point of the impact. And it's actually, and I had been talking to Suresh before they were workshopping this, and I was like, Suresh, you gotta, I need to know I need to know where the suffering is. I need to know what the pain point is. Because if I know what the pain point is, I can relate to the person and I can feel what they're feeling. And then I can draw on my own desire to help people and speak to that pain point, right? So this was all in Bangalore, and I was in a lot of meetings and stuff. And then we kind of hooked up at the end of the day, and they had these examples, and it was wonderful. And then Mick came in and said, it's almost like a little formula here. You go pain point, the impact of the pain point, enter Salesforce solution, impact.
I would add too that there's an efficiency gain as well, because like you say, the first one is fine, but it's a little abstract, and it doesn't land for me at least, when you scan it. The second one lands instantly. And I think it's to your point about addressing something that's real in the world. For me as a customer, it lands instantly, and I immediately understand what this is about. I often would tell writers about the minimalism, just to go back to a point you made earlier, is that if you have to read a sentence 3 times with 7 words to parse it out, and I've dealt with writers that did this, and it takes me 1 scan, 1 pass to read a sentence with 15 words. That sentence is more efficient. So it's not just a word count. And to your point, your example was shorter too, it looked like. So
not all. There's some that are a little bit longer, and that's why I'm not. I know we want minimalism as much as possible, but there are some examples that are a little bit longer. But to your point, look, the second one is also there's much more of a story there. It's not a complex story, and it's not a long story, but there's a narrative there, and
that's why it lands.
Yes, because that's how people think. People think in narrative. We relate to each other in narrative. Our entire lives are stories. And there's tons of research on this and why people remember stuff and why they don't. And, emotional, here's another story. There was this other study done. I think this was also a Harvard study around the person was trying to measure whether how negative emotions register versus positive emotions. And they showed this sample of people, 3 different pictures. The first picture was pictures of like a couple in an intimate environment, intimate setting, like. Second picture was people riding up an escalator. Third picture was a ferocious picture of a great white shark. They had people hooked up to all these brain things. I don't know exactly how they do this, but the brain registry for the first picture, which is the positive picture, calm, soothing, people in a romantic setting, and the brain registry of the shark were exactly the same registers in the brain, exactly the same. What they were measuring was, and I think I'm trying to remember the part of the brain they were measuring, but I can't remember. It'll come to me later in the conversation. But they were trying to measure, um, uh, sort of. They were trying to compare if there was any difference when someone they were measuring feeling is what they were measuring. When someone sort of feels good about something, whether someone feels bad about something, what actually happens in your brain is exactly the same thing. And then the neutral one, that one on the escalator, is just a sort of a dead measurement. My point is that, when you feel something, you're usually part of a narrative. Like when you look at that picture, the intimate picture versus the shark picture, you're bringing your entire world of experience to that vision, and you remember it. And this study was cited in a whole thing around like why people. The reason I even know about it is because I was reading something about why people remember narratives better than PowerPoint slides, for example. And this is exactly why, also, because there is a biological connection between emotion and memory, or emotion and registry. It's why everybody remembers where they were on 9/11, but you can't remember where you put your car keys, right? Or from, my mother's generation or my grandmother's generation, everybody remembers where exactly they were when the news came that JFK was shot, right? But you're walking around your whole house looking for your glasses and they're on top of your head, right? This is why. So the point I'm trying to make, Stan, is, emotion, narrative, feeling, human interaction, human connection equals memory. It equals retention. Now, I'm not saying let's write all our short desks with this human stuff and everyone's going to remember our short desks. I mean, I don't know that we care that people remember our short desks necessarily, but we want people to walk away with the feeling so that they register their experience with Salesforce as something pleasurable, right? And that's a tall order for technical writing. It's not something that your typical tech writing department really talks about, but I think we should do it.
Let me ask you this, though, just to play the devil's advocate. What would you say to people? Well, the feeling part is marketing's job.
It is, but first of all, marketing is a pre-sales motion. Marketing's job is to generate feeling, and marketing's job is to manipulate the world at large into buying your product. It's not our job. People reading documentation have already bought our product. We're actually not making any money off of people now. Well, adoption, we want adoption to continue, but we're not, you get what I'm saying. It's like we're not trying to convince someone to come in the door anymore. What we need to do is enable people at that point. And we need to enable them in a way that makes them successful, that both makes them successful and makes them feel good. And I think that's a lot what Trailhead was originally about too. But we just, we need to make people feel good. And I think, and that's, I taught English for years. As a lot of you know. I taught college, I taught high school, I taught everything. And there's nothing like that reward for a teacher that comes when they see that the student like really, really understands something, and the joy that accompanies that, the joy, and with kids, it's literally on their faces and stuff, right? And and then that makes me joyous, and so everybody's happy. It's like, I mean, the world is so terrible. It is such a terrible place. Like, why would we not want to bring as much joy into the world as possible? And my argument, Stan, is, and I've only really recently come to this in the past couple of years, maybe, as I've been kind of climbed into this position leading all of industries, which is something I never thought would happen. But I've been working with industries. I can see firsthand from the business perspective, the scale that we have and the influence we actually have in the world, and just how far reaching our stuff is, how far reaching Salesforce is, but how far reaching that documentation is, because we are reaching thousands and thousands upon hundreds of thousands of people a day. And the fact is, it's just like, any piece of writing, whether it's a novel or it's a white paper or it's a piece of technical documentation, one is it's all communication. It's all going out there to another person somewhere, and that person is going to absorb that. But it's happening on such a huge scale with Salesforce and with Salesforce documentation. We have no idea the impact sometimes that we're having. There could be a doc. We used to get these kind of case studies all the time that would kind of come back into us when I was leading nonprofit. The beekeeper in Africa who's trying to run his whole small business on this new Salesforce mobile platform, and has to read a doc and then, writes in and says, "Thank you so much, you helped me." I mean, there are these incredible examples out there for Salesforce, and they put them all over Dreamforce all the time. We're not strangers to them. But my point is that for every one of those that we see, right? For every Dreamforce video that gets featured on the big stage, there are thousands of more people reading our documentation, having to absorb it, having to stitch it into their life of Salesforce that they have to live because it's their job. And we're writing that. We're writing that stuff. That is hugely powerful. There is a huge responsibility in the hands of every writer at Salesforce.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie Shaw in one of the episodes podcasts made that point eloquently, almost as eloquently as you have, but that this audience is so much bigger than we realize.
And I'll say one more thing, unless you want me to say more. I'll say one more thing, because it's I can talk forever, Stan, you know that. These ideas are not common in technical writing departments in the industry. I think we both know that. I think it's so much about ROI. How much output can we get the instructions out, get people doing their jobs, get them in and get them out. And I'm not negating the value of that conversation. That's just a different conversation. And we do need to have that. We do need to continue that conversation. But if you don't believe that technical writing can be something else, something greater, then it's never going to be. Right? And, it's like that. It's the Henry Ford quote. It's the Henry Ford. What do you say? Something like, if you believe you can or you can't do something, then you're probably right. And it's like, if you believe technical writing can never be more than set up instructions and box check, and this is what this setting does. If you're a technical writer and you believe that is the limitation of what technical writing does in the world at large, then that's all it's ever going to be for you. But I've seen this. I've seen, more human-centric approaches work for both readers and writers. And that's the really exciting part, because it gets the writers so excited too, because they can actually then finally understand the actual impact that they're having in the world, and not that they're just employees of a company.
Yeah, that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
That the impact is, it's much bigger than people realize. You're absolutely right. And I think it's fair to point out here too, that the things we're talking about are all over tech. This isn't just focused on one company. We had it at my previous company, and I've seen it elsewhere. So these are kind of universal challenges. The other thing I didn't know, you said, "Oh, everybody knows I was a teacher." I didn't know that. And it's worth talking. You were a teacher at high school and college?
Oh yeah, I mean, I came from academia. I was in grad school for like 4 billion years, working on my PhD thesis, and I was teaching, college classes alongside that. I was at UC Santa Cruz, and I was teaching Victorian literature, and then I started a huge outreach program out of the Dickens Project at UC Santa Cruz that basically was around bringing Victorian literature into high school classrooms, more into high school classrooms, and we were partnering with schools in LA Unified School District to develop the whole program on it. So yeah, I was going in there. I was underserved communities all around USC. We were particularly partnered with the schools around USC, and I mean that was where I probably learned more than anything, more there than I learned anywhere else in my entire graduate career, because I was working hand in hand with a lot of these students and a lot of these high school teachers down in LA Unified, and just saw the transformative power of literature. I'm a very deep believer in the transformative power of literature, and no one will ever sway me from that, because I lived it, and I've watched my kids live it, my students, I mean, and I've watched the way literature has transformed their lives and transformed, even but by extension, their families' lives, which is where all this passion comes from out of me around writing and communication. Because I actually don't think that technical writing is all that different. I mean, yes, it is different from, Great Expectations, the Salesforce, analytics guide or platform documentation is very different from Great Expectations or Middlemark. But at the same time, what's not different is the active communication.
Yeah.
And how you choose to do that communication, and the potential of that communication to change people, specifically your readers. And that's the kind of the unifying thread here. And that's the background I come from, and those are my beliefs. And I try to live them every day, because I truly, truly believe that words can change the world.